What's going on, guys? Reisshub back with another video, and in today's video I want to talk about Benjyfishy, Savage and Letshe and how they've kind of underperformed this season. What I want to say straight up is this is obviously no shade. This is more of an actual analytical look at the gameplay and the main mistakes that they have made. I feel like these guys had the potential to win everything, and they've made kind of a couple big mistakes that are very, very common and have happened through multiple FNCSs so far. So I want to see this so that you can kind of pick these trends up in other teams when future FNCSs, and just a way for everyone to improve and learn. So these are some of my favorite players, so obviously no shade. So let's get into the video. So if we cast our mind back all the way to Season 3, when this trio started to come together, this is where the hype really started to build, and for good reason. They were performing. In the Daily Cups, now obviously this isn't a grand final situation, but they were performing, they were winning so many, they were consistently winning day after day after day, top 5s over and over and over again. The Cash Cups back then, they were consistently winning these over and over and over again, and placing very, very highly in the top. There was also all of the third-party tournaments that were there. They were winning, they were placing extremely well, and even in the Amar Cup that was there, the actual in-tournament Amar Cup, they placed first, second, and then 6th in the grand finals of this. So consistent performance, and all of the performances that they had this season brought that hype up throughout the entire community, and they were clearly stating that they were the #1 trio at that time. So what about their FNCS weeks? Well, they started off really strong in the warm-up, placing 6th. Very good performance. They were contested by Rotary, Stormurite, and Toos, and they picked up 2 victory royales out of the 12 games, did very, very well here. However, when it started to come into the FNCS weeks after that, they ended up not placing so well in really any of the qualifiers. They placed 16th, 22nd, and then didn't even make the finals in qualifier 3. And remember, to auto-qual through for the heats, you needed to come top 8. And for a team of this caliber, you would think this should be a really, really easy task. When it came to the heats and the finals, they performed pretty well. They came 5th, and then they became 8th. And then, just this weekend, we've had the Encore Cup where they ended up placing 29th out of 33 teams. Now, potentially, they've not been scrimming for trios, they've not been practicing for it, so obviously the performance will dip a little bit. However, at the same time, they made a ton of the same mistakes that they made in the previous weeks. So what was it that made the differences between performing poorly in the Encore Cup and then also in the qualifying weeks in comparison to doing pretty well in the heats and the grand finals? Their biggest issue was indeed drop spot. Doom's Domain is not a place that is worth landing if you are being contested. Same with Stark Industries. Out of all 7 of the regions, none of the winners of the FNCS grand finals were contested. It was so much more worth landing at another POI that did not have a mythic spot, be it Doom's Domain or Stark Industries, because you could just get consistent loot, be uncontested here, and win. Mongrel's team was a little bit of the difference here, but they were uncontested for the majority of their games going Stark, got a huge lead, and then got contested. So that is a little bit of a note to the side, but fundamentally the majority of teams were uncontested who won. Now, during the qualifier weeks, Aqua, Rezon, and Noah Riley, the guys who were contesting them, were one of the best teams for fighting in the region, if not the best fighting team in the region. And they're contesting Benji, Savage, and Letshe all through weeks. The issue here is the fact that both teams want this POI, and both teams will not leave this POI. It would have been so much better if after the first week, when none of the teams performed, that if one of them just left, went to another POI, and started performing from there instead. If we look back to the seasons where they performed well in Season 3, Benji, Savage, and Letshe were dropping in what was at this time the Agency. There, they were performing because a lot of the times in their tournaments they were uncontested, and when they were contested, in all honesty, it was a bit of a weaker team who was landing there. They were able to completely dominate them off spawn and then move on out, winning so many games. Difference in loot, despite the fact that yes, at this time that was also Mythic POI, it wasn't that amazing. There were still 100% chest spawns back then, so it wasn't that much better than landing in other places. The Mythic drum gun that you got was good, but it wasn't amazing either because this was after the nerf. The looted Dooms is obviously fantastic, but the problem is when you're being contested by one of the best fighting teams in the region, you waste so much time, you waste so much materials, and you waste so much heals fighting them that it's just not worth doing at all. It would be so much better off trying to secure a drop earlier on. And this is a problem that we've seen throughout multiple FNCS so far. If we cast our mind back to the Duos FNCS, we see CRR and Metro trying to go for the Shark, contesting 4CR and Kinstar. Both teams, all the weeks, just ended up griefing each other so badly that none of them ended up doing well. When Metro and CRR could have performed very, very well if they were able to actually leave this drop spot and go somewhere else. It's the same thing we've seen through multiple seasons. Teams who are uncontested are doing so much better than teams who are actually contested. Now, if we look at this from a perspective of, okay, normally in some metas, in duos is actually a good example where you can land at a POI, not fight, and then disengage. But in trios, this is almost impossible, in particular with Doom's Domain. You are never going to be able to get enough materials from Doom's Domain, enough heals and enough loot, and then actually get on a good rotation path without fighting the team who has landed there, because there's just quite frankly not enough loot on the map with the lower chest spawn rate. That forced these two teams to fight, or what happened in the Encore Cup is that Benji, Savage and Letshe tried to disengage multiple times. However, the majority of the times that they disengaged, they didn't have enough loot, they had very, very minimal materials, and they just ended up scuffed, fighting another team, or just didn't have enough resources to actually play the full game out, and just underperformed in each of the matches they ended up getting off spawn. So this was just a fundamental problem that you could not contest a team in Doom's Domain and place in the top. And this is what we saw in the heats and the grand finals. They were uncontested, so they placed much better 5th and 8th in comparison to their qualifier week. So overall, landing at this POI being contested by one of the best teams in the region fundamentally just was not working out for Benji, Savage and Letshe at all, and at this point they definitely should have switched POIs and would have performed so much better. The Doom's loot is not worth it, and we proved over and over again throughout all of the qualifier weeks, all of the other tournaments pretty much this season, that if they were contested, this loot was not worth landing on, and they definitely could have alphaed up another POI. There's absolutely no doubt about it in my mind that they could have got another POI uncontested and bullied off a weaker fighting team from that spot and performed so much better. Honestly, it was quite lucky that they got it uncontested in the finals because of the fact that Aqua got banned and that he then would not have landed on them. I feel like they probably would not have gone 8th if they were contested off spawn this time, because that's just what history has shown so far. The fact that they managed to perform so poorly, in particular in the Encore Cup coming 29th, shows that something was going horribly wrong with just the overall play style that they're playing. It wasn't necessarily their individual mechanics, their fighting skill, it was just their game plan as a whole. And one of the biggest issues is that during the qualifiers, since they really didn't get to play out their games properly, they never really left with good loot, with good materials, with good heals, they didn't rotate early, they didn't even really get time to plan their strategies out that well. When it came to the heats, warming up for the heats, I remember hearing in my ear, this could be wrong, so don't take this for fact, but I remember hearing Savage say that they needed to find a Storm Surge strategy because they were going to be uncontested, which showed that so far they'd been fighting off spawn so much, they didn't even need to get Storm Surge, they didn't even have a plan, like a full built out strategy on how they're going to rotate and get Storm Surge strategy at this point. They did end up getting a good strat where they rotated north to fight the teams who were up in the Homely Hills, but at the same time, having to plan this in the heats rather than being able to have the 3 weeks of qualifiers to test this out, to try this format, to see how it's going to work for a heat and a grand finals. This should have been a strategy that they had solidified in week 1, week 2 and week 3 in the qualifiers, really nailed by the end, getting better and better as the weeks went on. And let's look quickly at the Dreamhack duos. Now, I've been talking a ton about drop spots, and let's look what happens in the first Dreamhack Duo tournament. That's where Savage and Benji actually placed 3rd. So they performed extremely well here, placing 3rd, and why is the difference in this? Is because they didn't drop at Doom's Domain. They decided to switch back to the Ruins, which you can also call Agency or Authority, whatever you want, but it's called the Ruins right now. And they performed very, very well here, just by being uncontested in this other drop spot. They had a really good strategy laid out for their entire game plan, and maybe also they were like mentally refreshed. You know, it's a new meta, it's not trios anymore, it's duos, they feel good, but they're starting this performance for their duos off very, very strong. I hope this continues for this team, and I hope Letshe also does very well in his duo, whoever he decides to play with, or if they do squads and they decide to play together, I don't know what it's going to be, but fundamentally this team has the potential to do extremely well, and I hope that changing their drop spot from Doom's Domain, being super contested by one of the best teams in the region, will end up performing very, very well for them, and they can perform up to their true potential that I know they can. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned a lot. I like these discussion type of videos about these kind of players because they are fantastic players, and I really want to kind of highlight some errors that anyone can make, and in particular anyone can make in a big grand finals. You can see the best of the best players in the world still making really crucial and really basic mistakes. It happens on every region, happens all the time. Please like the video if you haven't already. Please subscribe if you aren't already for more Fortnite competitive updates and informative videos. Catch you later. Peace!